But leading the news this morning, a developing story about Iraq, and Mike Schneider has that story and all the other news of the day. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Joan. Good morning, Charlie.
Hi, Mike.
This is a major story developing this morning. U.S. and British agents have now pulled the fuse on what was potentially a powder keg of disastrous proportions. ABC News has learned that a shipment of devices, one source says they are triggers for nuclear bombs, has been intercepted en route from the United States to Iraq. Now, the intended route apparently worked this way. The shipment went from New York to London's Heathrow Airport. Then it was intended to go from London to Baghdad, that is the capital of Iraq. We're told now that the devices are at a shed at London's Heathrow Airport. We're also being told now in late reports that 3 people have been arrested, 2 men and 1 woman, who are said to be connected with the Iraqi airlines at Heathrow Airport, and that many more people are being questioned about this scheme right now. We'll have more details, of course, as they become available. And we have more right now on the murder of that American missionary in Lebanon. The reports differ. Some say that William Robinson was singing to his children, singing them to sleep. Others say that he was praying with them. But all the stories end the very same way. Masked gunmen barged into his home and shot him dead. Earlier, locals had accused him of being an Israeli agent. A leftist guerrilla group has now claimed responsibility. The Soviets are now blaming the press for their problems in Lithuania. So now all foreigners have been ordered out of that republic. Meantime, the uneasy standoff between Moscow and the independent-minded government drags on this morning with no end in sight. Here's Jim Hickey.
Lithuanian members of parliament continued forming their breakaway government this morning. There were no further confrontations with the Soviet military overnight. In Paris, Soviet Defense Minister Dmitry Yatsev defended this week's roundup of Soviet army deserters. The Soviets claimed they had become anti-Russian militants in the independence movement. More than a dozen Lithuanian deserters were captured in violent attacks on 2 hospitals. Eyewitnesses have said they were beaten. But Lithuanian Deputy Prime Minister Romualdas Ozolas says he has received assurances the captured deserters, while forced to finish their military service, would not otherwise be punished. In a further effort to reduce the political temperature, Soviet officials have also assured Lithuanians that troops here belong to the Baltic military region and have not been sent in from other districts around the country. There are reportedly 55,000 Soviet soldiers in the Baltics. They have the full support of Russians living here in Lithuania. Thousands of them held a pro-Soviet anti-independence demonstration outside Parliament yesterday. They say independence will lead to economic and social catastrophe. Lithuania is economically dependent on the Soviet Union. Soviet officials have also reaffirmed the right of Lithuania to break off from the Soviet Union, but they again warn it has to be done in the right way. It is not enough, they warn, to simply open the door and leave. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Vilnius, Lithuania.
Back in this country, Idaho's Governor Cecil Andrews says he refuses to be hurried into making a decision on that bill which essentially outlaws abortion as a method of birth control in that state. Some groups have threatened an economic boycott of Idaho if he does sign it. There have also been rallies now in Guam in response to an even tougher abortion law. If the courts allow this to take effect in that U.S. territory, it would be illegal to even tell someone where they can get an abortion. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments today in 2 cases of reverse discrimination. One involves a Hartford, Connecticut TV station, which the FCC ruled had to be sold to a minority group as part of an affirmative action program. A white man says he was told not to even bother replying, so he's taken his case to court. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney is reviewing the bottom line of some very expensive Pentagon projects today. As Bob Zelnick reports in his series, Facing the Future, changing world politics is calling for big changes in defense priorities.
More than half the U.S. military budget goes toward protecting Western Europe against Soviet attack. With the threat reduced, so are the dollars.
That's why we're taking down 2 divisions in the Army in 1991. That's why we're shutting down the production of M1 Abrams tanks. That's why we're stopping building Apache helicopters.
But the administration cannot make its proposal for 2% real cuts stick. The figure is likely to be twice that amount. For the first time ever, big-ticket items designed for use against the Soviets are on the cutting block. The B-2 bomber, the MX and Midgetman missiles, and strategic defense.
I think it's probably perfectly appropriate, given world conditions, to forecast a defense budget by the end of the decade that's about half the size that it is today in constant dollars.
That could mean a so-called peace dividend of up to $150 billion a year by the end of the century. Some say part of the money should be used to restore the economies of Eastern Europe, thus consolidating the U.S. victory in the Cold War.
We have to translate that victory into the successful political democratization and economic transformation of Eastern Europe.
Others say the U.S. industrial base should be made more competitive in the changing world environment.
Take some of the dollars that are saved and redirect these into, say, technology efforts for the long term.
But there are economic dangers. The loss of big projects will cost some workers their jobs. Smaller contractors dependent on weapons programs could go out of business. The industrial ability of the U.S. to build up for war and Cold War has proven a decisive edge. Its ability now to build down from high military spending will be no less critical a challenge. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
Bob's series continues tomorrow. He'll take a look at the effect of all that on the arms control process. Now here's the ABC News calendar for today, Wednesday, March the 28th. There will be hearings today on Capitol Hill on the dangers of lawn chemicals. Lawmakers will hear from those people who say they have been poisoned by the pesticides. A congressional gold medal will be posthumously awarded to Olympic star Jesse Owens today. And North Dakota Governor George Skinner is auctioning off his state car today. Why? Well, he says it's to save the state money, and besides, he admits, he never did figure out how to use all the car's electronic gadgets. Finally, doctors in New York City say they're simply delighted with the progress being made by pop star Gloria Estefan. She had 2 steel rods surgically implanted in her back after she broke a vertebrae in a traffic accident last week. The doctors say she's making such good recovery now she's actually walking up and down the hospital hallways and could be heading home to Miami by the weekend. Miami happens to be, by the way, the spring training home of a baseball team by the name of the Baltimore Orioles. And I think, Charlie, you wouldn't mind being there to catch a game or two over the weekend, huh?
Music to my ears, you're talking there, Mike. Absolutely. Opening day against Kansas City, April 9th, 2:30. It's going to be on ESPN.
How about them O's?
I don't mean to plug another network, but I'm going to be sitting watching the opening game.
That's right, we own that network anyhow, so what the heck?
Oh, that's right, we do own it.
Yeah.
Major part of it. Oh, okay, yeah. ESPN, 2:30. Orioles, opening day. April 9th. What do you got on the weather?
We've got a big mess bursting out here in the nation's midsection. Let me stroll over and show you what's happening by way of satellite. Got a little static cling here. Okay, we've got a flow of subtropical moisture coming off the Pacific here, flowing right through the southwest. You can see the overnight movement of thunderstorms from New Mexico right on into Texas, just bursting through there. These are pretty powerful storms, and this second wave of moisture is going to bring more storms to that area of the southwest today. And of course, this represents snowfall here in the Utah, Wyoming, Colorado area. 4 to 5 inches of snow have accumulated in some locations already. Another 4 or 5 could fall on top of that today, as this is a rather strong system as well. But what's going to happen with today's weather is the rainfall is going to continue to be rather heavy here in the Central Plains, the mid-Mississippi Valley, down to the lower Mississippi Valley. 1 to 3 inches of rainfall likely in some locations in Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas. There could be some flooding in those areas. Meanwhile, look for another wave of thundershower activity to break out here in New Mexico and push into western Texas. And of course, the snowfall will continue over the central Rockies. In the higher elevations, there could be 1 foot to 1.5 feet of accumulation. But record warmth up in the Pacific Northwest, where skies will be sunny. Skies will be sunny across the northern tier of states and all the way over to the Atlantic coast. High temperatures today in this area, nice and spring-like, 60s and 70s, but the remainder of the nation generally will be cooler than normal. Highs in the 30s, 40s, and 50s across the northern tier of states and in the nation's midsection. That's a look at the national weather. Here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning. Good morning. We'll have some areas of morning fog, otherwise mostly sunny with highs near 80 for the valley, 60s for the coast, upper 60s to near 70 otherwise.